In this video, we're going to turn this sad vintage jet boat back into a happy one again. So stick with me and I'll take you along for the ride. So what we have here is a 1977 Baja 19BR. The BR stands for bow rider, since you can ride up in the bow. My dad and my uncle bought this thing brand new in 1977. So this is also a jet boat, as I mentioned in the, as you may have seen in the preview. It's powered by a Berkeley 12JE jet, and it has a 403 olds for the power plant with a Rochester quadrijet on top there. So what we're working on is our thrust bearing. I had this thing up north for the 4th of July and ran well all week. But on my way back to the trailer, it started making a god-awful noise, and it turns out I lost my thrust bearing. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to replace that. Now, I've never done this myself, so this will be an adventure, but basically, the best way to do this is pull that motor up and out. The pump itself is epoxied to the hull, so you don't want to do that. So we have to pull the motor up and out. Down here you can see we have a bell housing. Basically there's a U-joint bolted onto the flex plate that comes out with a shaft and goes right onto the pump shaft itself. So what I should have to do here is pull this motor up and out, and it should slip right out. But in order to get the motor out, I need to unhook some hardware here. So I got to get rid of my exhaust manifolds, unbolt those, undo my wiring back there. Back down in that corner, you can see there's a water inlet to the engine. I'll have to take that off. Also have to unhook my throttle linkage to my carburetor. And I think that's just about it. So, oh, and my electric here over to the battery. So I'm going to go ahead and get on that and start unhooking that stuff. I'll bring you back if there's anything that I run into, but yeah, I'll show you as I'm lifting the motor out. So I'll bring you right back. Alright, we're making some progress here. I got all my water lines disconnected, I got my battery disconnected, got my fuel line disconnected, exhaust manifolds unbolted on both sides. I think all I have left to do is the wiring here. And then I have one motor mount on each side to undo, and she should pop out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take off the wiring on the back side there, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to label each wire 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 from left to right, so I know exactly where each one goes when I disconnect it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will bring you back after I get the motor mounts loose. So stay tuned. All right, all, here's where we're at. I'm going to utilize my overhead hoist to lift this engine out. So I actually have a video of me installing this if anybody cares to see. You can look right about here and click on it. I'm also utilizing this, I don't know, it's called like a lifting balancer, I guess. Not necessarily intended for engines, but it should work. So I've got the chains looped down, and I've got bolts going into the holes for my exhaust manifolds. So I've got 4 anchor points. I actually have upward tension on this right now. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up my motor mounts all the way, and in theory, I should be able to lift this thing up and out. So I'm going to get the motor mounts loose and out, and then I will show you as I lift to see if this works out or not. So stay tuned. All right, motor mounts are completely out, so we are suspended by that hoist right now. So let's see if we can lift that bad boy up and out. So have a look-see. All right, well, something's a little stuck here, so let me just have a look-see and I'll bring you back when we're through. 1 second. All right, well, we're up. So what I wound up having to do was flip my seat up so that my pulley on the front there had a little bit more clearance. So I was able to tip it up ever slightly and jerk it back and lift it up out. Looks like I have just enough height here to get it up and over the boat. So what I'm going to wind up doing here is pulling the boat forward and then setting the motor down on the floor there. So I'll go ahead and do that and then bring you back when I'm done. So stay tuned. All right, the engine is safely on the ground. It actually went pretty slick. Again, this winch setup has done a lot for me as far as I worked on a tractor engine last summer. I used it for working on my lawnmower, lifting it up, working on my snowmobiles in the winter. It's been awesome. It worked perfectly for this application. So again, I'm just going to show you guys the setup here. Yeah, so we have a U-joint bolted right to the flex plate there, and that's how it is. And then we have a slip splined fit here that goes on the other end of that shaft in there. So we're going to hop up in the boat and we're going to start getting ready to take that shaft out to get to that thrust bearing. So I'll show you once we get up there. Look at that. So much more room for activities up here now. Okay, so there is the end of our impeller shaft there. So you can see there are 4 cap screws that need to come out, and our bearing, there'll be a seal right behind that, and our bearing will be right behind there. So I'm going to go ahead and pop out those cap screws and I'll show you what she looks like. Stay tuned. Before I show you the remnants of that bearing there, I just want to give a shout out to a company called Bolster. I am not sponsored by them, but a YouTuber that I follow by the name of Junkyard Diggs showed this product on there for collecting all your hardware as you're taking stuff apart, and it's been really useful for this application. This is just a like a rubberized material resistant to oil. That we can keep track of your hardware. So these are all my bolts for my bell housing. These are my exhaust manifold bolts. These are my motor mounts. These are those cap screws I just took out from my bearing retainer there. So really useful product if people are looking for that. This, I guess, is their original, and they have other models as well. Anyways, let me show you what I uncovered here. It's not pretty. So this cap pulled right off. As you can see, there's an oil seal in there, and pulled the cap off, and here's the remnants of that bearing. Can you say toast? Yeah, she's shot. So I'm going to go ahead and push that shaft the rest of the way through and pull it out and show you what's left. So stay tuned. All right, so the shaft was out. The bearing was stuck in the housing there, and I couldn't get it out. I don't have a slide hammer or anything. Well, not a real one anyways, or any sort of a puller that would reach in there. So I did have, this is a slide hammer, but it's actually from a dent puller kit, and I was able to just kind of hook it on the end there and hammer back. It was good enough to pop it out, because otherwise I don't know how I would have gotten that out of there. So, I mean, this goes to show you don't necessarily have to have all the fancy tools. They certainly help, but sometimes you got to work with what you got, and found something laying around that worked for me here. So I'm going to go ahead and get those remnants together like I said, and I will show you what we have left. So stay tuned. Well, here it is, everyone. I mean, geez, that bearing was roached. You can see it actually broke the inside of it there. Parts everywhere, chunks everywhere. Holy cow, look at how wore out that is. I'm surprised I actually made it back to the dock. Wow. So now, this is supposed to slide off. So is this. There's supposed to be a snap ring right here, but it almost looks like it got pulled over the snap ring. So I might have to drive it back this way, and then see if that snap ring's still in there, and then come back this way. So let me investigate further here, and then I'll get back to you. Alright, so what I did here is I opened up my vise so that it was just big enough that the spline portion would fit through there loosely, and rested the edge of what's left of the bearing on there, and I beat down with my dead blow on the top here. I was able to shift that back a little bit, and hopefully you can see that. Yeah, see there is a groove in there. There is supposed to be a snap ring there, so I'm guessing that got forced forward and busted that snap ring out. So I'm going to work to get this off this way all the way, and using the same method, except I'm going to have to like pound from the side here over, because I don't have a vise, or I don't have a press. So got to work with what you got, and this is what I got. So I'll bring you back when I'm done. All right, well, I got my remnants of the bearing and that shaft sleeve off the shaft there. So this one pounded off pretty easy, the bearing portion of it. This was stuck pretty good, so I wound up, I was able to pound it down to where the splines were, and then I took my death wheel and I cut a slit in it right in line with one of the splines so it didn't damage anything there. So those came off. So I do have my new bearing, and I do have a new snap ring, and somewhere in here, yep, there it is, I also have a new shaft sleeve. So I got all the parts I need to put this back together, but what I have to do, so normally they say you put this bearing on with a press. Again, I don't have a press, so what I'm going to try to do is put this in the freezer for a good long while, and then try to see if I can pop that bearing on and maybe put that bearing out in the sun to let her heat up nice and good, and see if I can slide that on. So I'm going to have to leave you guys. I am actually going on a side-by-side trip tomorrow, so I got to pack. So I'm going to put this bad boy in the freezer over the weekend. Shh, don't tell my wife, but that's what I'm going to do. Put it in the freezer over the weekend. Then when we come back, that thing should be good and shrunk down, as good as it's going to be, and we'll go ahead and we'll see if we can get that bearing slid on there. So I'll catch you guys after the weekend. Later. All right, we're back. So before I do any more on the inside, I'm going to actually go ahead and install my new wear ring on the outside of the pumper, because it's going to be a lot easier to do that without the shaft in there. So we have our insulator here, which you see it has a 90-degree portion of it. That goes on the inside here. So you go ahead and you stuff your insulator in there, work it around, and get it so that the ends line up, just like that, and make sure that it's square against the back there. Okay, there, now it looks like it lines up pretty good. All right, so now you can take your wear ring, and here you can see I have a shouldered wear ring. That's going to go in this way, the shoulder towards the boat. Okay, so I'm actually going to take some soapy water, spray it around there to help lube things up a little bit, help that wear ring slide into place a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to take the wear ring, stuff it in there, get it started, just like so. Then I'm going to take an old Impeller and put it in there. So now the reason I said this is going to be easier without the shaft in there is because I don't have the center cut out of this Impeller. So if the shaft was in there, it would want to ride on that shaft, and it would bottom out eventually. So so having it this way, I can put the shaft, or the old Impeller in here, and use that as like a seal driver basically. So I'm going to go ahead and work our way around. Keep working like that until that wear ring is all the way in there. We're inching our way in. Let's have a look, see, we might be just about there. Oh, we got a little ways to go here. We're almost there. I don't know if you can hear that, but it sounds like where seat of the pitch has changed. You hear more of like a metallic metal on metal thumping rather than a dull thud. So there. Wear ring is fully installed and seated. So now we'll go ahead and we will hop up inside and finish cleaning some stuff up in there. Alright, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put my shaft sleeve and bearing back on my shaft. Now this is not the correct way to do this. You should be using a press, but I don't have a press, so you got to work with what you got, and what I got is a hammer and my old shaft sleeve with the hole cut in it. So you see I've already got my shaft sleeve started. The shaft has been in the freezer for almost a week now, so it's nice and cold. I added a little bit of heat to my shaft sleeve. I was able to work that on a little bit. Added a little bit of heat to my bearing as well, not too much because I didn't want to cook anything out, but now I want to get that pounded on. Now it's important, you want to pound it so that you're putting all the pressure on that inner race there, so we're not actually damaging the ball bearings here. So what I'm planning to do is set this up on the vise like so, and drive the shaft down that way using this portion to pound against and erase the bearing. Now, hopefully you can see this here, but there's a little half moon shape there. That half moon needs to point towards the engine, which would be that way on the shaft, okay? So it needs to go on that way. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and try to get that started. So stick with me here. So I'll just pound this down like so until I get it started a little bit better. Okay. All right, we're making a little progress here. I'm actually going to set this up down like on a piece of wood or something until I get it a little bit farther down inside the that old shaft sleeve there. So I'll bring you back once I get it that far. So stay tuned. Well, actually, that was a little bit easier than anticipated. Once I got that thing down a certain point, it just really popped back on. So putting that shaft in the freezer really helped. So you can see here, hopefully, I've got my snap ring groove exposed. So now I just have to put my snap ring on and this thing's back to where it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You don't need to see me do that. You know, just use a snap ring wrench and pop her in place. But I'll bring you back once I'm done. All right, our snap ring is back in place. It's always a good idea to look to make sure that it's fully seated and locked down in that ridge there. And I've checked it all the way around, so we're good. Now we'll hop up in the boat and clean up some of the mess in there. So I'll hop up in there and show you what we got. All right, so basically down in there where the bearing was, that will get squirts of grease every time you go out on the lake. So there's all kinds of old grease and stuff protruding everywhere, plus all the shards from the old bearing. So I'm going to take some degreaser, some brake cleaner, some rags, my hands, and I'm going to get that all cleaned up to get ready to put that new bearing in there. I don't want any filth in there when I'm installing that new bearing. So I'm going to go ahead. You don't need to watch me do that. It's going to be a nasty mess, but it should look different when I'm done. So stick with me. I'll bring you back when I'm done. All right, we got everything pretty well cleaned up around there. I mean, you can still see that there's grease around here, but everything inside where that bearing goes is all squeaky clean now. Including I got my old oil seal out. You can see that was pretty beat up and I had to kind of pound it out. All right, so next step, I'm going to put my new oil seal back in. So I've got that right here. Now this needs to be installed per the manual so that the spring that you see right here, oop, I popped it out, but that faces out towards the impeller. I'm going to get that spring back on here, but I'm going to also take some grease right here and put it around the outside. And I'm going to use the seal installer to pound it in there. Now you want to get a seal installer that's just about the same diameter as the outside of that seal, so that you're not pounding on the inside of it. That way it'll seat in there nice and good. So that goes all the way in the back there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will show you once I'm done. All right, my seal is in. So now we're about ready to halfway install our shaft and get our packing in there. I did remove the old packing. I didn't talk about that, but here it is up here. Just reached in there with a pick and pulled it all out. Before I do this, I'm actually going to go ahead and pack my new thrust bearing with grease. Doesn't say to do that, but it makes me feel better, making sure I get good grease in there right away. So I'm going to go ahead and pack that full of grease. Install the shaft part way, and then we'll show you how to put the packings in there. So stay tuned. All right, I've slid my shaft in. Side note, I put a healthy dose of grease on the other end of the shaft and up the shaft a little bit to help it slide through that oil seal easier. And I put some oil on the shaft sleeve. I'm sorry, some grease on the shaft sleeve since it slides into that seal in there. So I've got that partially installed. Now it's time to put in my packing. So the packing goes right down in there. Okay, the kit came with 4 pieces. There was actually 5 in mine that was in there, but we'll see if 4 is going to be okay. But the purpose of that packing is to seal the impeller shaft around the impeller shaft so that water doesn't come into the boat, because it's not an airtight seal around there. So with the 4 pieces, you can see I kind of pre-bent them into a loop like that. So you're going to stuff them in there, you know, end to end like that. And you want to stuff them in there one at a time, and you want to go opposite 180 degrees where the ends are, right? So you want to stack them up like this, then the next one's going to go like this, and the last one's going to go like this. Okay? After you get 2 of them in there, it's a good idea to take your, I think it's called a packing retainer. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. And push in 180 degrees to make sure that you're pushing those all the way in and they get them, you know, locked in there nice and secure. So I'm not really going to be able to show you that because it's going to be a little cramped down there. You're not going to be able to see, but I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then I will bring you back when I'm done. All right, the packing is installed. And I've also gone ahead and installed my retainer. You can see there's a nut and a bolt on each side there. Now you want to tighten that down just so that it's snug, okay? You don't want to put too much pressure on it yet. I'm going to go ahead and next I'm going to pound my bearing in, and then we'll give it a little bit more tension. But really, you don't want to over tighten that. You just want to have just enough so that you feel it pushing on the shaft a little bit. When it gives it some resistance. Because you want to make your final adjustment when it's in the water. Once it's in the water and you get the water pressure pushing back, you want it to be just dripping out when the engine's at idle. And it's not supposed to be coming out at all when the engine is off. So again, you can't really make the final adjustments till it's in the water. So I'm going to go ahead and pound that bearing in. In the manual and in videos I've seen, people do take a dead blow and pound right on the shaft here, but I'm going to try to work it in around the outside, just pounding on the outer race before I can. I don't like pounding on the race or on the shaft. It'll probably be fine, but it just feels like it puts extra strain on the bearing. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pound it in around the outside here, and I'll show you once I get that in. All right, shaft went in actually pretty easy. What I wound up doing was taking a small chunk of 2x4 and putting it against the bearing and just tap, 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 tap until I got all the way in. You can see it does go in past the outer face right here because there is a little protrusion right here that pushes against the bearing. So now my kit came with a new seal. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of that grease and smear it around here to help that gasket stay on there a little bit better, and then it's time to bolt my bearing retainer back on. I failed to film me putting the new oil seal in here, but I did, using the same method as before with that seal driver. On this end, you want, again, the spring to be facing towards the impeller, just like before. So I'm going to go ahead and get that all buttoned up, and I will show you once that's complete. So stay tuned. All right, my bearing retainer is installed and all snugged down. Now you can see that, you know, there's a big gap between the spline portion of the shaft and that seal there. Well, that's because the yoke from the engine slips over that and slips inside that that seal, so that's why there's a gap there. So no worry about that. So now I can go ahead and try to snug these up just a little bit more. So now here's a question. I think I may know the answer, but I haven't found out why. Whenever I've seen somebody install this shaft, they leave it partially out, then install the packing, snug it down, push the shaft in the rest of the way, then snug it down again. I think it's because when you push the shaft in, it helps push that packing in just a little bit more, but I'm not exactly sure. So if anybody knows, they can put in the comments down below to help a guy out. So I'm going to go ahead and snug those up a little bit, and I'm going to pack this bad boy full of grease. So now the manual says it takes about 50 pumps of grease. Now I've already packed the bearing, so it might be less than that. So I'm just going to keep pumping until I hear something start to ooze out on this side here. So stay tuned and I'll get that done. All right, as you can see, we got grease. It actually took about 40 pumps and I had grease coming out. I went ahead and I tightened those down on either side, so we're good to go. Now we will move on to installing our impeller. So I'll take you outside the boat and I'll catch you up when I'm there. And we're back. All right, so I've got my brand new impeller here that goes with my brand new wear ring that I installed. I've got my manual I downloaded from American Turbine, which is the owner of Berkeley now, the way I understand it. And what it tells me I need to do is I need to check the clearance between the back end of my impeller and this shoulder here on the wear ring. So I need 25 to 30 thousandths clearance at that spot. So they recommend using a 30 thousandths feeler gauge, so I've got one. I took an old feeler gauge set that I had that had fallen apart and I bent it to make it a little bit easier to check, because what I have to do is go down here through the inspection hatch and feel in there. So, they make long feeler gauge sets like this, but I don't have one, so you got to work with what you got, and here's what I got. So I'm going to go ahead and slide my impeller on so that it fully seats. I'm going to put my nut on there just to snug it up, and I'm going to check my clearance to see where I'm at. So there's no shim on there right now, so I'm going to go ahead and check it without that shim and see where we're at, and then I'll add shims as necessary to get to 30 thousandths. So stick with me. It's going to be hard for you to see what I'm doing, so I'm not going to show you. So I will bring you back when I'm done. All right, well, I was able to check my clearance, and it was actually about perfect. I had just a slight drag on that feeler gauge when I was in there, so I'm going to go ahead and install everything. So I need to put my keyway in. It recommends putting a liberal dose of anti-seize in the keyway slot on the shaft so that the impeller slides on and off easy if you ever have to take it off again. So all sides of the keyway, and then on the threads for the impeller nut. So I'm going to go ahead and get that installed, and I will bring you back when I'm done. Okay, I've got my nut installed with my keyway, all my anti-seize on there. Everything's snugged down as good as I can get it. Now, I can't do a full snug down because the engine's not attached, so I need that resistance from the engine to be able to tighten that nut, because right now, see, it just kind of turns at will. But got her snugged down pretty good. I rechecked my clearance on the back, and it still feels pretty good, but I'm going to leave this all open until I get the engine in there. And then I can recheck everything once I get that resistance from the engine. Now, you would think that I'm ready for the engine to get put back in, right? No, you'd be wrong. So, talking to a few guys on the Jet Boat forum on Facebook I belong to, they've just been a wealth of knowledge to me. They said, a lot of times when you have a catastrophic failure of that pump thrust bearing, it'll take out the thrust bearing in your engine, so you might want to check your end play. So, here we go. I've already done this, but I'm going to show you what the results are. Got my dial indicator set up there. I've got it zeroed out. Give her a pull. Whoa. That puts me at basically 95 thousandths. And the way I read it, 8 thousandths is supposed to be my clearance. So I'm going to double check that, but that's what it looks like I'm up against. So if that's the case, that means this engine needs to come apart. I'll have to drop the pan, take a look, for sure, take out, replace the thrust bearing and all the main bearings on the crankshaft there, but I'll have to check my rod bearings and everything else there too. So not good news, because believe it or not, this engine probably doesn't even have 10 hours on it. So not very good. So I'm going to go ahead and check all that and double check, and I'll bring you back and I'll let you know the results. So I'll see you later. All right, well, I've gone ahead and I checked my info, and the news is not good. Yeah, it's the clearance, the end play is supposed to be around 8 thousandths, so this engine has to come apart. So I'm going to end this video here, but I will make a video of me tearing that engine apart. So my cousin has let me borrow an engine hoist, so I'll be getting that this next weekend, and we'll put the engine on there and start tearing it down and see what she looks like. So until then, y'all take care, and thanks for watching.